My princess, why are you dancing?
I am just happy, no issues.
That's good then. I will be waiting for the good news.
There's nothing so special. I just remembered that you promised to tell me a story rolling on the floor laughing today before our boy will come back from school.
I don't have the strength to tell anybody the crescent moonlight story today. You and your son want to kill me with Dad. Tell me a story, or my sweetheart, tell me the story you promised me. I will not be able to tell you any story now, and later I will tell my historian boy a story this evening.
Please, Horny, I will prepare ugba with smoked fish tonight for you if you tell me the story.
You have started bribing me with food. You know that I love ugba. I will tell you a story, but you will promise to tell my boy the same story this night because I will be busy with some online courses.
I promise to tell him the same story, and I will tell you a story tomorrow. My lord, please tell me the story now.
Okay, don't bribe me again. I will tell you the story now. Here is the story of Ota Benga, the Congolese boy displayed as an animal in a New York zoo. Ota Benga was an African boy taken from his homeland in Central Africa and displayed like an animal at the Bronx Zoo in New York City, New York. Ota Benga was born circa 1883 in Ituri Forest near Kasai River, Central Africa, which would later on become the Congo Free State, currently the Democratic Republic of Congo, under the control of the Belgium King Leopold II. He was born into the Mbuti Pygmy colony, one of many small bands of extended family groups of between 15 to 20 people. These colonies were nomadic, moving from one temporary village or camp to another as dictated by the seasons and hunting opportunities throughout the year. At the 1885 Berlin Conference that partitioned Africa, King Leopold II of Belgium was allowed to take possession of the Congo Free State. In order to make his possession profitable, Leopold began to exploit the region's resources, including rubber, and imposed forced labor on the inhabitants, including the Mbuti Pygmies, which often were reinforced by beatings, amputations, and murder. As a member of the Mbuti people, Ota Benga lived in equatorial forests near the Kasai River in what was then the Congo Free State. One day after returning from a hunting expedition, he came to find that all of his village people, including his wife and the 2 children, had been murdered by Force Publique, a colonial Belgian police force established by King Leopold II as militia to control the natives for labor in order to exploit the large supply of rubber in the Congo. Alone and defenseless, he was later captured by Bashalele slave traders and put to work as a laborer in an agricultural village. In 1904, he was purchased by Samuel Phillips Werner, an American businessman and explorer who had traveled to Africa under contract from the Louisiana Purchase Exposition St. Louis World Fair to bring back an assortment of pygmies to be part of an exhibition. Werner discovered Ota Benga while en route to a Batwa village visited previously and purchased Benga from the slave traders for a pound of salt and a bolt of cloth. Werner later claimed he had rescued Benga from cannibals. The two spent several weeks together before reaching the Batwa village. There the villagers had developed distrust for the Mzungu white man due to the abuses of King Leopold's forces. Werner was unable to recruit any villagers to join him for travel to the United States until Benga said that the Mzungu had saved his life, and spoke of the bond that had grown between them, and his own curiosity about the world Werner came from. 4 Batwa, all male, ultimately decided to accompany them. Werner also recruited other Africans who were not pygmies. 5 men from the Bakuba, including the son of King Indome, ruler of the Bakuba, and other related peoples, Red Africans. The group was taken to St. Louis, Missouri, in late June 1904 without Werner, who had been taken ill with malaria. The Louisiana Purchase Exposition had already begun, and the Africans immediately became the center of attention. Ota Benga was particularly popular, and his name was reported variously by the press as Artaba, Autobank, Otobang, and Ota Benga. He had an amiable personality, and visitors were eager to see his teeth, which had been filed to sharp points in his early youth as ritual decoration. The Africans learned to charge for photographs and performances. One newspaper account, promoting Ota Benga as the only genuine African cannibal in America, claimed his teeth were worth the 5 cents he charges for showing them to visitors. When Werner arrived a month later, he realized the Pygmies were more prisoners than performers. Their attempts to congregate peacefully in the forest on Sundays were thwarted by the crowd's fascination with them. McGee's attempts to present a serious scientific exhibit were also overturned. On July 28, the Africans performing to the crowd's preconceived notion that they were savages, resulted in the 1st Illinois Regiment being called in to control the mob. Benga and the other Africans eventually performed in a warlike fashion, imitating American Indians they saw at the exhibition. The Apache chief Geronimo, featured as the human tiger, with special dispensation from the Department of War, grew to admire Benga, and gave him one of his arrowheads. In early 1906, Benga would briefly accompany Werner when he returned the other Africans to the Congo. He briefly lived amongst the Batwa while continuing to accompany Werner on his African adventures. He married a Batwa woman who later died of snakebite, and little is known of this second marriage. Not feeling that he belonged with the Batwa, Benga chose to return with Werner to the United States. Upon their arrival in US, Werner arranged for Benga to stay in a spare room at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City while he was tending to other business. Benga initially enjoyed his time at the museum, where he was given a Southern-style linen suit to wear when he entertained, but as time went by, he became homesick for his own culture. Two writers, Bradford and Bloom, have imagined Benga's feelings while at the museum as follows: what at first held his attention now made him want to flee. It was maddening to be inside, to be swallowed whole, so long. He had an image of himself, stuffed, behind glass, but somehow still alive, crouching over a fake campfire, feeding meat to a lifeless child. Museum silence became a source of torment, a kind of noise. He needed birdsong, breezes, trees. The disaffected Benga attempted to find relief by exploiting his employer's presentation of him as a savage. He tried to slip past the guards as a large crowd was leaving the premises. When asked on one occasion to seat a wealthy donor's wife, he pretended to misunderstand, instead hurling the chair across the room, just missing the woman's head. Meanwhile, Werner was struggling financially and had made little progress in his negotiations with the museum. He soon found another home for Benga. They're still interested in the story My Baby Love.
Yes, darling, I am enjoying it. Please continue.
Okay. At the suggestion of Bumpus, Werner took Benga to the Bronx Zoo in 1906. William Hornaday, director of the zoo, initially enlisted Benga to help maintain the animal habitats. However, Hornaday saw that people took more notice of Benga than the animals at the zoo, and he eventually created an exhibition to feature Benga. At the zoo, the Mbuti man was allowed to roam the grounds, but there is no record that he was ever paid for his work. He became fond of an orangutan named Dehong, the presiding genius of the monkey house, who had been taught to perform tricks and imitate human behavior. The events leading to his exhibition, alongside Dehong, were gradual. Benga spent some of his time in the monkey house exhibit, and the zoo encouraged him to hang his hammock there, and to shoot his bow and arrow at a target. On the first day of the exhibit, September 8, 1906, visitors found Benga in the monkey house. Soon, a sign on the exhibit read, "The African Pygmy, Ota Benga." Age, 23 years. Height, 4 feet 11 inches. Weight, 103 pounds. Brought from the Kasai River, Congo Free State, South Central Africa, by Dr. Samuel P. Werner. Exhibited each afternoon during September. Hornaday considered the exhibit a valuable spectacle for visitors. He was supported by Madison Grant, secretary of the New York Zoological Society, who lobbied to put Ota Benga on display alongside apes at the Bronx Zoo. Soon, African-American clergymen led by James H. Gordon immediately protested to zoo officials about the exhibit. James H. Gordon said that, "Our race, we think, is depressed enough, without exhibiting one of us with the apes. We think we are worthy of being considered human beings, with souls." A number of clergymen backed Gordon. In defense of the depiction of Benga as a lesser human, an editorial in the New York Times suggested, "We do not quite understand all the emotion which others are expressing in the matter. It is absurd to make moan over the imagined humiliation and degradation Benga is suffering. The Pygmies are very low in the human scale, and the suggestion that Benga should be in a school instead of a cage ignores the high probability that school would be a place from which he could draw no advantage whatever. The idea that men are all much alike except as they have had or lacked opportunities for getting an education out of books is now far out of date." After the controversy, Benga was allowed to roam the grounds of the zoo. In response to the situation, as well as verbal and physical prods from the crowds, he became more mischievous and somewhat violent. Around this time, an article in the New York Times quoted Robert Stuart MacArthur as saying, "It is too bad that there is not some society like the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. We send our missionaries to Africa to Christianize the people, and then we bring one here to brutalize him." The zoo finally removed Benga from the grounds. Werner was unsuccessful in his continued search for employment, but he occasionally spoke to Benga. The two had agreed that it was in Benga's best interests to remain in the United States despite the unwelcome spotlight at the zoo. African American newspapers around the nation published editorials strongly opposing Benga's treatment. Robert Stuart MacArthur, spokesman for a delegation of black churches, petitioned New York City Mayor George B. McClellan Jr. for his release from the Bronx Zoo. Ultimately, toward the end of 1906, Benga was released into Reverend Gordon's custody, who supervised the Howard Colored Orphan Asylum in Brooklyn. Gordon placed Benga in the Howard Colored Orphan Asylum, a church-sponsored orphanage in Brooklyn that Gordon supervised. As the unwelcome press attention continued, in January 1910, Gordon arranged for Benga's relocation to Lynchburg, Virginia, where he lived with the McCrae family. So that he could more easily be part of local society, Gordon arranged for Benga's teeth to be capped and bought him American-style clothes. He received tutoring from Lynchburg poet Anne Spencer in order to improve his English, and began to attend elementary school at the Baptist Seminary in Lynchburg. Once he felt his English had improved sufficiently, Benga discontinued his formal education. He began working at a Lynchburg tobacco factory, and began to plan a return to Africa. In 1914, when World War I broke out, a return to the Congo became impossible as passenger ship traffic ended. Benga became depressed as his hopes for a return to his homeland faded. On March 20, 1916, at the age of 32, most likely overcome with depression and heartbreak, he committed suicide. He built a ceremonial fire, chipped off the caps on his teeth, and shot himself in the heart with a borrowed pistol. He was buried in an unmarked grave in the black section of the Old City Cemetery, near his benefactor, Gregory Hayes. At some point, the remains of both men went missing. Local oral history indicates that Hayes and Ota Benga were eventually moved from the old cemetery to White Rock Hill Cemetery, a burial ground that later fell into disrepair. Benga received a historic marker in Lynchburg in 2017. Phillips Werner Bradford, the grandson of Samuel Phillips Werner, wrote a book on the Mbuti man, entitled Ota Benga, the Pygmy in the Zoo, 1992. During his research for the book, Bradford visited the American Museum of Natural History, which holds a life mask and body cast of Ota Benga. The display was still labeled Pygmy rather than indicating Benga's name, despite objections beginning a century ago from Werner and repeated by others. Publication of Bradford's book in 1992 inspired widespread interest in Ota Benga's story and stimulated creation of many other works, both fictional and non-fiction, such as 1994. John Strand's play, Ota Benga, was produced by the Signature Theatre in Arlington, Virginia. 1997. The play, Ota Benga, Elegy for the Elephant, by Dr. Ben B. Harm, was staged at Fairfield University in Connecticut. 2002. The Mbuti Man was the subject of the short documentary, Ota Benga, A Pygmy in America, directed by Brazilian Alfu Franca. He incorporated original movies recorded by Werner in the early 20th century. 2005. A fictionalized account of his life portrayed in the film Man to Man, starring Joseph Fiennes, Kristen Scott Thomas. 2006 The Brooklyn-based band Pinataland released a song titled Ota Benga's Name on their album Songs from the Forgotten Future Volume 1, which tells the story of Ota Benga. 2007 McRae's early poems about Benga were adapted as a performance piece. The work debuted at the Columbia Museum of Art in 2007, with McRae as narrator and original music by Kevin Simmons. 2008 Benga inspired the character of Ngunda Oti in the film The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. 2010 The story of Ota Benga was the inspiration for a concept album by the St. Louis Musical Ensemble May Day Orchestra. 2011 Italian band Mammothones recorded the song Ota Benga in their album Mammothones. 2012 Ota Benga Under My Mother's Roof, a poetry collection, was published by Carrie Allen McRae, whose family had taken care of Benga. 2012 Ota Benga The documentary film. 2015 journalist Pamela Newkirk published the biography Spectacle, The Astonishing Life of Ota Benga. 2016 Radio Diaries, a Peabody Award-winning radio show, tells the story of Ota Benga in The Man in the Zoo on the Radio Diaries podcast. 2019 The University of Alabama at Birmingham adapted Ota Benga's story into the musical Savage. 2019 Williamstown Theatre Festival premiered A Human Being of a Sort, a play based on Ota Benga's story, written by Jonathan Payne. Therefore, in conclusion, we see that except for a brief visit with Verna to Africa after the close of the St. Louis Fair, Benga lived in the United States as a slave, mostly in Virginia, for the rest of his life. That's the end of the incredible story.
Thank you, my love. The story stirred my mood, but it's well.
Let me go and prepare for my online work tonight. I will come out when Toby Chukwu, my boy, is back from school.